Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jalen Lamas, and today I'll be going over vernal pool extinction and primarily focused within the state of California. I'm going to go into a brief overview of what the topics I'll be discussing today. The first is what is a vernal pool? The second is why vernal pools are important. The third is threats to a vernal pool. And finally, the last major topic of discussion will be what can be done to prevent the extinction of vernal pools. So first off, let's go ahead and define a vernal pool. According to one of the leading experts on vernal pools, Paul Zedler, a vernal pool is defined as the following. It's defined as an ephemeral wetland that predictably forms in permanent basins throughout the cooler part of the year, but which stay dry during the summer months and are distributed throughout the world. Some key points of that definition is that these wetlands are ephemeral, which means they're intermittent. And most vernal pools only last for a few weeks out of the year, and they also form in recessions in the landscape. Vernal pools are usually formed by surface water, typically from rain and surface flow down from the watershed into lower basins of the topography. This is a picture of a vernal pool outside Travis Air Force Base near Davis, California. As you can see, there's three very distinct and clear zonations of this vernal pool. The center is where the ponding lasted the longest with the purple flowers, and certain species adapted to that length of ponding. Around the most central location of this vernal pool is that you have this secondary level of ponding. This is characterized by the yellow flowers surrounding the purple flowers in the middle. And finally, you see the edge delineation of the vernal pool with the native grassland vegetation around Travis Air Force Base and encompassing the vernal pool, which is that dark green and somewhat yellow intermittent flowers around this vernal pool. So let's go into why vernal pools are important. Vernal pools are extremely diverse, and rare species are found in nearly every vernal pool. Most species that are found in vernal pools are specifically adapted to that particular pool. So therefore, most vernal pools have at least one listed endangered species at the federal or state level. Another critical function of a vernal pool is that it provides habitat for the Pacific flyway. And the Pacific flyway is the migratory birds coming down from Canada, Washington, Oregon through California and down into Mexico for the winter. This provides a connected ecosystem for the migratory birds that provides shelter, food, and functional habitat for them. Next, I'll be going into threats of vernal pools. And the four major characteristics I would like to focus on in terms of threats today for vernal pools are prolonged droughts, grazing, climate change, and habitat conversion. And one of the most shocking pieces of information that I came across in researching this topic was a study published by King that 50 to 85% of all vernal pools in the Central Valley are now extinct due to agriculture and other pre-Spanish settlements. So let's kick things off and go into prolonged droughts. Prolonged droughts can lead to different plant species establishing in a vernal pool that require less water to survive. If the drought lasts for several years, the new recruiting species in that vernal pool area could be able to survive ponding. And depending on what the vegetation is, they could significantly alter the period of ponding of the vernal pool, and thus ultimately changing the hydrology of that vernal pool. And the other important aspect of a drought is that seed banks can only last so long. Certain vernal pools have adapted to have seed banks that can last for several years. However, vernal pools have a limited time to come back online so those species can germinate. And if they can't germinate after a certain period of time, the seeds will deteriorate and they will not reproduce. Grazing. Overgrazing can lead to habitat destruction of vernal pools, physically within the pool and the area around the pool. Overgrazing of the vernal pool upslope can increase the velocity of the surface flow of water down into the ponding areas for vernal pools. This can lead to a variety of issues, including the erosion of the recessions in the landscape and prevent the ponding of water in the future. Climate change is probably one of the biggest factors for influencing vernal pools. Many aquatic species require a very narrow temperature range to breed. Holst et al. In 2001 found some salamanders that utilize vernal pools for breeding need the temperature range to be about a maximum of about 44.6 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and above 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night. This very selective range is the only functional temperature where these salamanders can go ahead and breed in certain vernal pools of California. And in addition, we also have climate change that can also influence drought, as I mentioned earlier, and the seed bank might not be able to survive these prolonged periods without the seeds deteriorating, and this could pave the way for exotic species to go ahead and colonize in these areas. Conversion of land to other uses is also a major threat. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, 50 to 85% of all of the vernal pools that used to be in the Central Valley are now extinct due to irrigation and from consistent crop growth in the area. Most of these vernal pools were ultimately filled in unless loss of habitat occurred. And through this tremendous loss of habitat is also through the introduction of various different pesticides and other runoff from urban and agricultural centers. Vernal pools were also deepened for increased ponding on ag lands, which turns these vernal pools from something that would be ephemeral into something that's more permanent, and it can create species die-off in addition to changing the overall hydrology of that area, and the farmers would go ahead and use these pools as catch ponds to irrigate their crops in the future. And here's a picture in Salinas Valley of some row crops that were predicted to have been over former vernal pools. You can see the topography of the rolling hillside to the east, and through this you can see how these fields have been leveled for the purposes of irrigation and crop growth. What can be done to prevent these extinctions? And one of the biggest factors that can be done is using conservation easements. Currently, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has several programs that can go in and protect these endangered areas from going extinct. And this it can include supervised grazing, enclosures, and mitigation measures to prevent pesticide runoff from getting into the vernal pools and changing the pH or the water chemistry. And most of these programs include some sort of form of monitoring to ensure their success in the future, but also serve as early warning mitigation measures for the future to prevent any long-term habitat destruction. So I have some final remarks to wrap this presentation up. There are many external factors that lead to the decline of vernal pools, including climate change, drought, and grazing. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife has been very active in trying to reduce the extinction rates. However, it's too early to determine the success of the programs as of right now. And the preservation of this biodiversity is extremely important. Without these species, we could lose several different setups of genetic material that could be beneficial down the road for habitat restoration. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of your evening.